The mists of dawn roll slowly across the dusty plains before Troy. For a decade, the world has held its breath, suspended between hope and despair as Greeks and Trojans wage war beneath the shadow of gods. Now, as the first light of day glints off battered armor and bloodstained spears, a heavy silence settles, one that speaks of endings, of destinies about to be fulfilled. On these ancient fields, history and myth intertwine, and the final act of the Trojan War is set to unfold. Few wars have ever gripped the imagination of humanity like the Siege of Troy. From the epic verses of Homer to the tales whispered by firesides across continents, the story has been told and retold. A tale of love and rage, of honor and betrayal, of mortals caught in a cosmic game played by capricious gods. Yet, beyond the poetry and the legend, there is a deeper mystery, a question that still haunts archaeologists and storytellers alike. What truly happened on those windswept shores, and what secrets still lie buried beneath the ruins known as Hizarlik? As the 10th year of siege dawns, both armies are weary, battered by countless battles and the weight of endless loss. The Greeks, once a unified force driven by the outrage of King Menelaus, are now fractured by rivalries and grief. The Trojans, proud defenders of their city, stand ever more isolated, their allies fallen or fled, their faith in their gods tested to its very limits. The plain before Troy is a graveyard of heroes, marked by the shattered remains of chariots and the silent watch of scavenger birds. Yet, above all the human suffering, the greatest drama is unfolding not among mortals, but among immortals. The gods of Olympus, each with their own stake in this conflict, have turned Troy into the board for their celestial game. Zeus, the Thunderer, observes from his cloud-wreathed throne, intervening only when fate itself seems to demand it. Hera, his queen, burns with vengeance against Paris and the city that defied her. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, champions the Greeks, guiding their hands and whispering strategy into the dreams of their leaders. Aphrodite, radiant and dangerous, shields Paris with a love as destructive as any spear. Poseidon, lord of the sea, is unpredictable, at times favoring the Greeks, at others unleashing tempests to punish their hubris. Every clash of swords, every twist of luck, echoes with the laughter or fury of the gods. Within the Greek camp, a sense of desperation simmers beneath the surface. Supplies run low, tempers fray, and the memory of fallen friends haunts every fire. Achilles, the greatest warrior of his age, lies dead, his armor now wielded by another. Odysseus, ever cunning, paces restlessly, mind racing for a solution that might end the stalemate. Agamemnon, king of kings, feels his authority slipping as the men question the price of glory. The Greeks have tried everything: assault and siege, trickery and diplomacy. But Troy stands defiant, its gates unbroken, its spirit unbowed. It is in this crucible of despair that a new idea is born, one that will become legend. Odysseus, haunted by dreams of Athena and the words of a forgotten oracle, proposes a scheme so audacious it borders on madness. The construction of a colossal wooden horse, a gift to the Trojans in the name of peace, but in reality, a vessel for the Greeks' most skilled warriors. The plan is as much psychological warfare as strategy, designed to exploit the pride and superstition of the enemy. The Greeks set to work in secret, felling the sacred pines of Mount Ida and shaping them into the body of the horse. Hippias, the master craftsman, oversees every detail, ensuring the structure is both imposing and functional. As the frame rises, the tension in the camp is palpable. Can such deception truly succeed where so many swords have failed? Yet, beneath the fear, there is a flicker of hope, a sense that destiny itself is guiding their hands. Meanwhile, in Troy, life moves in uneasy rhythm. The city's mighty walls, built by Poseidon himself, so legend claims, have withstood every assault. Yet within those walls, anxiety festers. Priam, the aged king, prays for wisdom, his heart torn between the desire for peace and the need to honor the fallen. Hecuba, his queen, tends to the wounded, her dreams haunted by visions of fire and ruin. Hector, once the shield of Troy, is gone, slain by Achilles, his body returned only after days of grief and negotiation. Paris, whose love for Helen set this war in motion, walks the ramparts in sorrow, knowing the cost of his choices. Prophets and seers, among them Cassandra, cursed to see the future but never be believed, warn of disaster. She wanders the streets, hair wild, eyes burning with visions of death. I see flames. I see the city falling. She cries, but her words are met with pity or scorn. Only a few, like the priest Laocoon, share her suspicion. He senses treachery in every shadow, danger in every gift. Then, one morning the Greeks vanish. Their camp stands deserted, tents burned, ships gone from the horizon. In their place at the gates of Troy is the horse, towering, silent, mysterious. The Trojans flock to see it, marveling at its size and craftsmanship. Some argue to destroy it, to drag it into the sea or set it aflame. Others, led by the smooth-tongued Sinon, a Greek left behind with a carefully crafted lie, insist it is a sacred offering to Athena, left to ensure safe passage home. To harm it, he warns, would invite the goddess's wrath. Laocoon, unwilling to be deceived, hurls a spear at the horse's side. It shudders, echoing with the sound of hollow wood, perhaps a muffled gasp from the men within. At that moment, fate intervenes. From the sea, two monstrous serpents rise and seize Laocoon and his sons, crushing them before the horrified crowd. The people, terrified, see this as a sign from the gods. The horse must be brought into the city. With great effort, the Trojans breach their own walls and drag the horse inside. It stands in the central square, looming over the celebrations that follow. The city rejoices. At last, the war is over. Priam decrees a night of feasting in honor of the gods, of the fallen, and of the new peace. Wine flows, music rises, and even the weary soldiers allow themselves to hope. But as darkness falls, the real story begins. Within the horse, Odysseus and his chosen warriors wait in silence, pressed together in suffocating heat, muscles cramped and nerves on edge. Every sound, laughter, footsteps, distant song, echoes through the wooden walls. They wait for the signal, knowing that discovery means certain death. Beyond the city, hidden on the far side of Tenedos, the Greek fleet lies in wait. As midnight approaches, Sinon slips from his hiding place and lights a signal fire atop the ramparts. The ships, black silhouettes against the silver sea, silently return to shore. The gates of Troy, left unguarded in the revelry, will soon be thrown wide. Inside the horse, the warriors tense as Hippias unlocks the secret hatch. One by one, they slide to the ground, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. Moving like shadows, they fan out, cutting down the sentries and opening the gates to the waiting army. The Greeks pour into the city, torches blazing, swords flashing in the moonlight. The sack of Troy is swift and merciless. Houses are set ablaze, temples stripped of their treasures, men and boys cut down where they stand. Women and children, screaming in terror, are dragged from their homes. Priam, the king, is slain at the altar of Zeus, his blood staining the sacred stones. Polyxena, his daughter, is sacrificed to appease the ghost of Achilles. Cassandra, clutching the statue of Athena, is dragged from the temple, her prophecies unheeded to the last. In the chaos, Helen, The cause of it all is found by Menelaus. Some say he raised his sword to strike her down, but her beauty, undiminished by the years, stayed his hand. Others claim she was a willing pawn, returning to Greece as if nothing had happened. The truth, as always, is lost in the smoke and blood of that terrible night. Yet even amid destruction, mysteries endure. Legends speak of sacred relics spirited away by priests. Among them, the Palladium, a statue said to guarantee Troy's invincibility. Some believe it was smuggled out before the final assault, hidden in secret tunnels beneath the city. Others say Aeneas, a distant cousin of Priam, escaped with a band of survivors, carrying the hopes of Troy westward to found a new city, Rome. Dawn breaks over a city in ruins. The once great citadel smolders, its towers reduced to blackened stumps. Survivors wander the streets in shock, searching for loved ones or simply staring at the devastation. The Greeks, though victorious, are not unscathed. Many will never return home, doomed to wander or fall to new tragedies, a fate that poets and oracles had long foretold as the price for hubris and sacrilege. Back on Olympus, the gods too mourn. Some weep for the lost age of heroes. Others withdraw in silence, their game played out to its bitter end. The alliance between mortals and immortals is shattered, and the world shifts into a new era, one of lesser men and faded glories. In the centuries to come, the story of Troy will be told again and again. Archaeologists will dig through the layers of ash and rubble, seeking the truth behind the legend. Some will find charred bones and melted bronze, evidence of a real catastrophe. Others will find only questions about the nature of myth, the power of belief, and the line between history and story. But the echoes of that night, of fire and betrayal, of gods and mortals, will never fade. The fall of Troy is not just an ending. It is the seed of countless new beginnings scattered across the world like the survivors themselves. And so, the mystery endures. What secrets still lie buried beneath the stones of ancient Ilion? What truths did the last poets and priests try to preserve, even as their world burned around them? Was the horse merely a clever trick, or the symbol of something far deeper, a warning from the past, a riddle for the future? Dawn's pale light crept over the smoking ruins of Troy, painting the broken stones in shades of ash and fire. The city that had stood proud for generations was now a shattered memory. Its mighty walls toppled, its temples desecrated, its streets choked with the spoils and scars of conquest. What the Greeks had not carried away, the flames consumed. Yet for all the destruction, the true secrets of Troy would not die so easily. They would ripple across the world, hidden in the journeys of survivors, the whispers of bards, and the mysteries left for future ages to solve. In the days that followed the sack, the Greeks, flush with victory but haunted by loss, divided the treasures and survivors of Troy. Yet, even as they celebrated, omens of doom haunted their camp. The air was thick with curses, some whispered by the Trojan women, others by the priests whose gods had failed them. The Greeks had won the greatest war the world had ever known, but at what cost? For many, the journey home would be a trial far worse than anything faced before the city's walls. Among the most famous of these doomed wanderers was Odysseus, whose cunning had brought down Troy, but who would pay a high price for his role. The gods, angered by the Greeks' sacrilege, particularly the violation of Athena's temple, decreed that almost none would return home unscathed. The sea itself became a labyrinth, filled with monsters, storms, and illusions, as Poseidon unleashed his fury on the victors. Odysseus would wander for 10 years, facing cyclopes, sirens, and enchantresses, his fate a mirror of Troy's own agony and endurance. But it was not only the Greeks who suffered. The fate of the Trojan survivors became the seed for new legends and mysteries. Aeneas, a prince of Troy spared by the gods, gathered the last loyal followers and set sail into the unknown, carrying his father, his son, and the sacred relics of his people. Guided by omens and visions, Aeneas' journey would eventually lead him to the shores of Italy, where, according to Virgil and later Roman tradition, he would become the ancestor of the founders of Rome itself. Thus, from the ashes of Troy, a new empire would rise, one that would shape the destiny of the Western world. The question of what was truly lost in the fall of Troy has fascinated generations. Did the Greeks truly take the fabled treasures of Priam, a king's ransom in gold, gems, and sacred artifacts? Were there relics of power hidden within the city, objects said to grant favor of the gods or doom to those who misuse them? The story of the Palladium, the statue of Athena that supposedly made Troy invincible, is one of the most enduring. Some say it was stolen by Odysseus and Diomedes before the final assault, smuggled out under cover of darkness. Others insist it was spirited away by Trojan priests, hidden deep underground or carried west by Aeneas. Its fate remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Modern explorers who have dug through the layers of earth at Hazarlik have found evidence of fire, violence, and sudden destruction, ash and broken walls, arrowheads embedded in brick, skeletons buried in the collapse of towers. Yet, for every answer unearthed, new questions arise. Was there a single catastrophic event, or was Troy destroyed and rebuilt many times over centuries of war and migration? Are the treasures described by Homer and later poets mere invention, or do they mask real caches of lost gold and forgotten technology? Beyond the physical remains, the mythic resonance of Troy's fall has echoed through time. Medieval chroniclers sought to trace their own nations back to Trojan refugees, spinning tales of kings and heroes who crossed Europe in search of new homelands. In Britain, legends grew of Brutus of Troy, founding the island's first kingdom. In France, noble families claimed descent from Priam and Hector. Even today, the story serves as a canvas for dreams of lost civilization, secret bloodlines, and the idea that history is written not just in stone, but in story. Yet, the legacy of Troy is not only one of glory and loss. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride, the unpredictability of fate, and the limits of human ambition even in the shadow of the divine. The Greeks, though triumphant, returned to shattered homes, civil strife, and, for many, oblivion. Agamemnon, the great king, was murdered upon his return by his own wife. Menelaus wandered for years before reclaiming his throne. Ajax, driven mad by the gods, died by his own hand. Only a few, like Nestor, lived to tell the tale and die in peace. For the Trojans, the future was equally uncertain. The women of Troy, including Hecuba and Cassandra, were divided among the conquerors, their fates the subject of tragedy and lament. Some, like Andromache, would become queens in distant lands, raising new dynasties from the ashes of the old. Others vanished into obscurity, their stories lost or twisted by the victors. The city itself, once the pride of Asia Minor, became a symbol, a memory of what was and what might have been. As centuries passed, the story of Troy was kept alive by poets, playwrights, and philosophers. Homer's Iliad, though focused on the events before the fall, became the foundational epic of Western literature. Later authors added their own layers, filling in the gaps, inventing new heroes and villains, new motives and betrayals. The Aeneid of Virgil recast the Trojans as noble ancestors of Rome, giving the vanquished a victory of their own in legend, if not in fact. Each retelling brought new mysteries, new interpretations, and new debates about the line between truth and myth. The fascination with Troy extended beyond literature. In the 19th century, The German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann set out to prove that the city was more than a myth. Guided by Homer's descriptions, he excavated the mound at Hizarlik and uncovered the remains of ancient walls, towers, and treasures. Some hailed his discoveries as proof of the legend's basis in fact. Others criticized his methods, arguing that he destroyed as much as he preserved and that the objects he found belonged to different eras, conflating centuries of history into a single narrative. Still, the allure of Troy endures. Modern archaeological techniques have revealed a complex site with at least 9 layers of settlement, each destroyed and rebuilt over millennia. The level known as Troy VA, dating to the late Bronze Age, shows signs of violent destruction around the traditional date of the Trojan War. But was this the city of Priam, Hector, and Paris? Or merely one of many towns caught up in the tides of ancient conflict? For some, the answers lie not in the stones, but in the stories. The rituals described in the myths, the sacrifices, the omens, the curses, speak to a world where the boundary between mortal and divine was ever shifting. The intervention of the gods, whether real or symbolic, reflects the deep anxieties and hopes of a people living on the edge of chaos. The wooden horse, whether an actual siege engine, a metaphor for treachery, or a misunderstood memory of ancient technology, embodies the power of cunning over brute force, of imagination over fate. Yet, the mysteries do not end with the fall. The curse of Troy, it is said, followed the victor's home. The Greeks who had violated sacred spaces, who had broken the unwritten laws of hospitality and piety, found themselves haunted by disaster. Storms wrecked fleets, families were torn apart by vengeance, and entire kingdoms fell into ruin. In the end, the price of victory was so high that it called into question the very meaning of triumph. The survivors of Troy, scattered across the world, became the bearers of memory and myth. Aeneas's journey, whether historical or invented, captured the imagination of Rome and later Europe. Other refugees, unnamed and forgotten, may have carried fragments of Trojan culture, language, and technology to distant lands, seeding the growth of new civilizations. Some legends speak of lost cities founded by Trojans in the Balkans, on the Black Sea, or even as far as the British Isles. The truth of these stories remains elusive, but their persistence testifies to the enduring power of Troy's legacy. In the ruins themselves, clues remain: burned foundations, collapsed towers, and the remnants of hurriedly abandoned treasures. Archaeologists have found weapons and armor fused by fire, arrowheads cluster at gates, and the bones of men, women, and children who perished in the chaos. Inscriptions, though rare, hint at names and prayers, desperate pleas to gods who did not answer. Even today, the site inspires awe and curiosity, drawing visitors who hope to touch the past and perhaps catch a glimpse of the truth behind the legend. But perhaps the greatest mystery is the one that lingers in the imagination. Why did this story, above all others, survive the millennia? Why did the fall of one city become the template for so many tales of love and war, heroism and ruin? Was it the scale of the conflict, the drama of its characters, or the sense that, at Troy, the world itself changed, from the age of heroes to the age of men? For the ancients, Troy was a warning and a promise. It showed that no city, no matter how strong, could stand forever. It reminded them that pride and passion could bring down even the mightiest, and that the favor of the gods was as fleeting as the morning dew. Yet, it also offered hope, that from destruction could come renewal, that the end of one story was the beginning of another. Today, the echoes of Troy can be heard not just in ruins and relics, but in the stories we tell about ourselves. Every tale of lost greatness, every myth of a golden age ended in fire, carries a trace of Troy's shadow. In the mysteries of the past, we find reflections of our own fears and dreams, the longing for meaning, the search for truth, the question of what endures when all else is lost. As the fires of Troy died down and the victors sailed away, the survivors began to weave new destinies from the ashes. Some found refuge in distant lands, their memories shaping the cultures they joined. Others faded into legend, their names remembered only in song and story. Yet, the spirit of Troy, the hope, the courage, the defiance in the face of doom, lives on wherever people remember, question, and dream. And so the saga continues. The city may have fallen, but its mysteries remain, buried beneath the layers of earth and time, waiting for those who dare to seek them out. For the true story of Troy is not just about kings and warriors, gods and monsters. It is about us, all who wonder at the ruins of the past and ask, what really happened here and what secrets are still waiting to be found? In the end, perhaps the greatest lesson of Troy is not in its fall, but in its endurance. A city destroyed, a people scattered, yet a story that refuses to die. Each new discovery, each new retelling, adds a layer to the myth, bringing us closer to the heart of the mystery. And as long as we search, as long as we remember, the legacy of Troy will never truly fade.